It's the week of Monday, November 28th, and this is episode 133 of DuckTalks. Thank you to everyone who's listening or watching this. Thank you for checking out DuckTalks. We are excited to be on the microphone tonight as we have a special guest with us. My name's Mitch. I'm one of your hosts. I have Pirate Steven with me.
Ahoy there.
And we also have special guest tonight, Ken Plume.
Well, hi there.
Ken, thank you for joining us tonight on the podcast.
Happy to be here. Happy to do so.
Yeah, it's one of those things. We've come across you a few times online in various places, and we know been a huge fan of the show. And when the announcement came out that there was an art book coming out for DuckTales and that you were involved, it was exciting to hear that a fellow fan was working on it.
Was it a complete shock? Did it just come out of nowhere? Was it?
I don't think so. There was something that was said. It seemed like something you might do, and we had heard that you might have had some connections.
Well, I do recall in that weird sort of now makes it fits perfectly, almost like it was laying a clue for something neither of us knew would happen at the time. There was at one Dragon Con one year. I'm pretty sure it was Dragon Con that one of you left a DuckTalks button at my table when I was not there.
That was me. You were at a panel. You were doing.
I was at a lot of panels. I was barely at that table.
You had a friend working the table, and as soon as I came through, I had one of my DuckTalks shirts on, and they were like, "You've got to wait for Ken." And I was like, well, when will he be back? Because I didn't know you. I had not met you before. I was like, when will he be back? And it was past when I needed to have left to get back.
Also, whatever time they told you would not have been correct.
So it would have been much longer.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure, if at all.
Yeah. I don't doubt it. They were insistent, though. I really hated walking away. And I was like, listen, I've got to go back over here and talk to Don Rosa one more time. Before I leave, I'll swing back by.
I gotta take this shirt off. Go talk to Don Rosa.
I think that was the same year that I sat down with him for over an hour, going through. That was when the Life and Times came out. I think not came out, but the collection volume.
It was
1.
in the process, I believe. Because that would have been what, 2019? No, 2018, I think, is when you left the button, right?
Okay, so it might have been the year before that then.
So the last show I did was 2019. And then things changed.
Exactly. Yeah. I've not been able to make it back to Dragon Con since, and it's killing me.
Same. Although, could have been the opposite of going back. So
That's true. That's true. Now, you are an East Coaster. Me and Pirate, we're also on the East Coast. So the time zones are a lot easier.
I know you've had some West Coast guests on in the past.
Yeah, we do, and it's always fun. That's why I make sure I put that EST on everything I send out.
Yeah, it's never fun to mix that up.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the Art of DuckTales, which is a book that was just released this month. What's left of early this month. We're practically through November at this point, but we're going to talk about that. Before we do, we want to talk about you for a minute and learn a little bit more about you. I'm sure people listening to the podcast would like to know about your fandom, and that's like where we like to start anytime we have someone on. I want to ask you. We know you're a fan of DuckTales. So where does that come from for you? Like, where's your fandom for DuckTales come from? And what are you a fan of in general? I see a lot behind you, so I know there's a lot of fandom there.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on. General fandom, just about anything you could name, from Muppets to Star Wars to anything that, a Gen X kid of the late 70s through the 80s would have had burrowed deep into their brain. As far as the duck side of it, it was starting with the comic books. You used to get them in those little Whitman samplers at gas stations and convenience stores. So it was a very easy kid gift. and supplies to get from parents for reading material for trips or when you were sick or anything like that. Just fell in love with the stories, with the characters, was very much aware of Scrooge and that whole pantheon of characters when DuckTales launched. And so immediately was excited about that series, loved it. During the time, had some friends who worked at Disney Television Animation at that time. So, I got a lot of information and materials through them around the time the movie was being produced. So, I've always been somewhat plugged in to things,
Yeah.
even at a inordinately young age. That someone may go, well, what were you doing that connected at like 10? But,
Yeah.
it
You were like a
just
pen
happened
pal.
away. And always just fascinated by process and the behind the scenes and what goes into the making of these things and the people who make these things. So that always has been an interest of mine.
That's very cool. Honestly, for me, that interest has just come about in the last 5 or so years, with the creation of DuckTales 2017 and getting excited about it. And then looking back on those things that I loved as a kid and learning who made them and where they came from. So it's really cool that you already were plugged into that and learning about that, when the shows were on, especially, I mean, like we take for granted, um, where animation is at today, but really that Disney afternoon and Disney television animation was really pioneering at the time. And I, of course, as a kid, didn't realize that, but it was
Well, it was
really cool to learn
pioneering for
about now.
Disney at the
Yeah.
time, for Disney to take that plunge to do long form animation on TV. They had always done segments on things like Wonderful World of Disney over the years and produced material for that, but to do independent storytelling that wasn't tied as some kind of bumper interstitial for something else, and decide to also allow their characters that had been extant for years to be used in that, even in the limited capacity that Donald was used in
Right.
DuckTales, was a big move for Disney to do at the time. So, it was something that was innovative for the company, just in general, that they took that plunge and sort of defined that late 80s period.
For sure. I mean, everything that I remember watching during that period was Disney was Disney television animation. There's a few things sprinkled in there, and a little bit later, when the whole Fox fiasco happened and Fox decided to start doing their own kids animation, there was some stuff in there that got me. But before that, it was mostly Disney, or you had the Wile E. Coyote cartoons that were still running. But yeah, it's really cool. So with that, and did you follow features much? Was that, or was it
Oh
really
yeah.
just that television? Okay,
Oh no,
so
no,
all
it
of
was
it.
across the board. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
features, TV. That was also the rise of home video, so you could discover all the things from years past. Also, how present the Disney Channel was, and how much the Disney Channel really mined the archives at
Yeah.
that period of time. So where you would see Wonderful World of Disney's all them old making of specials, everything that was in the vault was on Disney Channel at that period. I mean, every scrap that they could dig up, every little interview piece, it was all on there. They filled those hours.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they bring
I
that
saw
to Disney Plus at some time, because they got so much
Oh,
archive
yeah.
material in that period.
I mean, that they haven't in now, 3 years we've had Disney Plus, and none of that has made its way. None of the stuff that was even extant for Disney Channel. They've transferred none of that to it.
Yeah, it seems like a big miss. Because, I mean, they spend so many $1 million on episodes of shows, and they have all this material already made that people would fall in love with if it just got out there.
And it doesn't need to be high resolution. I can understand that there might be some issues with the fact that all of this is standard and looks pretty cruddy if anyone's going in there expecting crystal clear HD quality. But if I'm sure, you were probably there as well. All the speculation of Disney fans before the launch of Disney Plus about what a treasure trove. Like, it's all coming back. We're going to see everything when we want to see it. We can mine through all aspects of the vault, everything that's there. And then none of that. None of that
Yeah.
came. Was one of the huge disappointments of the launch of Plus. And still, it's just not a focus of theirs, and it's a shame.
It'd be nice if they start to roll it out, even if they trickled it out a little bit at a time. I really like the documentaries that have dived into, some of the history of the company. It'd be cool to see them go into their television history and pull more of that out. I do feel like we've gotten a lot of the afternoon, but the other stuff for sure, Disney Channel.
I mean, the fact that they haven't even gotten their shorts catalog up there, whereas HBO Max from day one had about 85% of all of the Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies up there to view, is a huge difference.
Yeah.
And that Disney, on the very least, couldn't get their classic shorts up there it's disappointing, to say the least.
It is.
Yeah, everybody that had those Leonard Maltin box tin sets of all the shorts. I mean, if people could actually watch them on Disney Plus, it'd be a huge win.
And it shows a difference in, at the time, Warner Brothers' commitment, because they had remastered. I mean, everything they put up on Max when it launched was HD versions of all those shorts. So either Disney hasn't done that work, or just hasn't bothered to put it up if they have done that work to transfer all that stuff to HD. Because you'll see it trickle out as bonus features here and there. They'll toss a short on a Blu-ray, but the commitment that Warner's has shown has not been mirrored by Disney.
Yeah, I want to show my kids Aladdin the series, but they don't know it exists right now because it's not on Disney Plus.
Yeah, I mean, it's what that deep catalog could have been and should have been, could still be. Who knows?
Could still be.
Iger's back. We'll see.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? It's all the miracles are going to happen now. Isn't that what's going to it's
overnight?
That's what we're hoping for.
Overnight. Yeah.
That's
Just
what we're hoping
snaps
for.
his fingers, puts his magic cardigan on, and everything happens.
You said that you were a fan of the comics, talking about the Disney Ducks specifically, and then also DuckTales when it came out. With DuckTales 2017, you're also a fan of this version of the characters. And in our time online interacting with fans, there's really kind of three Duck fans out there. There's comics only, there's 87 DuckTales, and then there's those that are like, all of it's good. We can handle all of it. And there really is kind of this division there that we've experienced online with some, and it's totally cool. Like, I have my favorite versions of stuff, and those are my favorite. It doesn't take anything away from the other ones for anybody else, but from what I'm gathering from you're a lot like us in that you have enjoyed the comics, the 87 series, and now the 2017 series.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are much more worthwhile things in this world to be angry about than the existence of something that is optional to watch or read. So the fact that this exists, all these versions exist, great, fine. Doesn't take away from any of the other ones. If you want to ignore the existence of the 2017 series, of the 87 series, of the comics, that's your life to live. That's fine. But anyone who's going to argue about it or write manifestos and theses on message boards about it and be angry in disturbing ways at creators for working on things is a sad life to live. And it's unfortunate that kind of vitriol is spent on something that is just for entertainment purposes.
Yes, agreed.
And I'm sure you've seen plenty of it over the years in various corners.
You know, it was really surprising, to be honest with you, when we first started to come across it, and just how passionate some people were, which I'm glad they're passionate about what they're passionate about. But really, the 2017 DuckTales, I came into it, I know Pirate's similar. We came into it with the knowledge of the 87 series, not really having that connection to the comics, like a little bit, but not, we didn't know all of Carl Bark's work. We did not follow Rosa until 2017. And 2017 DuckTales kind of introduced us to that world where I was literally we were getting ready to record podcasts. And I was like, I feel like I'm missing something with this. Like, there's something bigger here. And I love that 2017 connected with it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how people will adjust their thinking just in order to complain, because there were plenty of people that detested the 87 DuckTales
Right.
for how unfaithful it was to the Barks comic books. Who is Launchpad? Who is Webby? Why are these characters here? These should not be here. Or why would you adapt this story that way? Who now, in order to tear down 2017, will go, well, 87 was so faithful, and why is it not anything like that? I mean, you latch onto the things that are your touchstones at a certain age, and you're going to have nostalgia for that. That's all well and good and fine and fantastic. And as you can see from behind me, I have a lot of influences myself, but I'm not going to be angry or hateful about some new different version, because the things that I love still out there. It's not like 2017 came out and everyone's homes were broken into to take their copies of 87 and all evidence of it were erased, or the comics were destroyed. It all exists. It's all fine.
It's like that story that Frank tells about Doofus, where they were going to change Doofus so much for their series that he literally got online and did searches trying to see if there was a fandom and found nothing. And then when the episode came out, people were in protest of what they had done. It's just it's crazy. It's hilarious.
Again, it's just relax. Everyone just chill out, relax. If you want to ignore it, it existed, that's fine. But don't waste your time writing so many words online. So many. I dipped my toe in just to see how bad it was out there, and I saw so many massive posts. So many that just were breaking down a whole timeline of crimes against creativity that supposedly were perpetrated by this version of DuckTales. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. I'll leave it at remarkable.
I felt like where 2017 shined was where they went their own way. Like, they did a great job of making connections for those of us who already had a connection with the characters. But where it really shined was when they broke away and did their own thing. And that's one of the reasons why I love it. And I think that's why it'll stand the test of time. It'll be remembered for a long time. My kids absolutely love it and talk about it all the time. It's usually high on the list of what we're going to watch. But so this book, now I saw this play out online. When you brought it up later, it was like, oh, okay, I see how that happened. Can you tell us a little bit about how the book came to be?
Well, what did you say? Were you aware of the fact that tracks were being laid when this? Because you're talking about a Twitter exchange that happened between Frank Angonis and I, just happenstantially, towards the end of 2019, where he was replying to someone else who was mentioning the similarities in the approach to pop culture, I believe, and just storytelling that DuckTales 2017 had to the Venture Brothers, which is a show on Adult Swim. And I wrote the art and making of book for that with Jackson Public and Doc Hammer, the duo behind Venture Brothers. And so I saw this comment, and I was a fan of DuckTales by that point, and I knew of Frank. We had no connection prior to that. And I just made a reference to that, just offhandedly, about, so when are we going to do the art of book for DuckTales? Now, at that point, it had not been announced or known that DuckTales was ending. Right. That they were already working on season 3. The finale was already locked in. That things were winding down with DuckTales. And that, even Frank, wouldn't be at Disney for much longer. And then one by one, the creative staff all went their ways as the production wound down, as they do. So that was just an offhand comment. Frank replied that he would love to see such a thing. I made a comment back about, well, let's see what we could do. You never know. And then we sort of went private on going back and forth. And I was about to be in LA on a trip over the holidays, end of 2019. And I said, well, let's get together and talk about it. And so we got together, had a little breakfast, and had a conversation about sort of what the shape of something like that could be. I had some thoughts about it, about, based on how I had done the Venture Brothers book, and who to involve and how to involve and how much fun it could be and how much information and stories there were. And, this is, again, at this point, just between Frank and I. And so we're continuing along in this conversation. And then he said, well, you should talk to Sean Jimenez, who was the art director of DuckTales. And then I had, during that same trip, a meeting with Sean at a little coffee shop outside somewhere, I think in North Hollywood, and talked about, and Sean is just a font of stories and loves to talk. And the thing about this also was, this whole thing was unprecedented. If you look at Frank's response to this, there's never been an Art of book for any Disney TVA property. The features got them all the time. I don't think there's been a feature for the last 25, 30 years that has not gotten some kind of Art of making book. But TVA has not gotten any for any of its shows. So even the thought of this was sort of like left field, weird. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, there's going to be an Art of book, whatever. It'll never happen. Whatever forces conspire against such things, this was never going to happen. And so Sean's also sort of view was like, yeah, this is a fun cup of coffee and a fun conversation, but nothing's going to come of this. So, but at that point, I now met them both and knew that I really enjoyed talking with them, hit it off with both of them. They were great folks. Unfortunately, Matt Youngberg was, I think, he was still on his holiday vacation at that point, so couldn't meet up with him while I was out there, but he was on board and excited about it. At that point, I think it also, the Susanna Olsen had been talked about it. Everyone was excited. That's on the DuckTales side of it, and even the notion of it, everyone was excited about it. And so then it came to me going, well, let's see if Dark Horse Books, who I'd worked with on the Venture Brothers book, let's see if they would be interested in doing such a thing, or if it was even possible. Because I knew they had done some Disney stuff. They had relations with them. They had also done some art books for Lucasfilm side of things. So there was a relationship and a license there. Whether it could be applied to the DuckTales thing, we never knew until we asked. So I went to my editor on the Venture Brothers book, Patrick Thorpe, an amazing editor, great guy. We had been through a bit of we had been to the trenches on the Venture Brothers book. It was a long, long journey to get that thing done. So this was sort of a, hey, you ready to get back in the trenches? Is this something that you want to do? Does this sound fun to you? Interesting to you? And Patrick, he was excited about the idea of it, and he took it up the line to Dark Horse. Dark Horse was able to make it happen with the license with Disney. And so we got the word back that there was going to be an Art of DuckTales book, and then the pandemic hit. And everything went a little bit weird, but it's probably the best, worst thing that could have happened for the book. So
Yeah,
that's been a long monologue from me.
I was absolutely shocked when you first tweeted out that it was something real, because it's something that everybody requests and dreams of, but rarely ever happens for a fandom. I know when Disney Infinity, we were heavily involved in that. Everybody would always ask for an art book or some behind the scenes with that, and nothing ever came of that. And just for it to happen with DuckTales, it being the first DTVA show, and for it to come out as great as it did, it's just phenomenal. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, everyone was excited about it, and I wanted to make it as good as it possibly could be and involve as many folks as could be involved, based on just pure logistical issues of trying to arrange this. Oh, again, during the pandemic, A lot of people to talk to, a lot of narratives to weave through it, and a lot of episodes to cover, and then a lot of supply chain issues to deal with. So there were a lot of things that went into this, but the overriding thing was that everyone involved with the show loved the show and loved working with each other, which made the excitement to do something like this palpable. And it was the only thing that kept pushing it forward, was that everyone was on board in making it happen.
You can really tell that in watching the series, that the people who were working on it, you can feel it in what they were doing, what they were producing. And so I can see them very much being on board with working on the art book. And not only that, but putting in the time. Did you keep up with your hours? Do you know how long you spent on the art book?
I mean, again, there were well over 100 hours of interviews.
Yeah.
That went into it. And then that doesn't, then there's the whole jigsaw puzzle of putting all those interviews together. It very, there wasn't a huge percentage of it where everyone was together. And even then you still have to bring other viewpoints in. You have to, again, it's finding that narrative flow of this person's comment fitting with that person's comment. Because I love doing the first person one. There are a lot of third person making of books that are, just reading through it. I like the idea that the creators are telling their story. So my function there is, as an interviewer, to get all the information out of them and be able to then take all of that and make the reader think that all of the people talking are in the same room playing off each other. Like, I hope at no point when people are reading through it, it isn't that it's not terribly obvious that, oh, well, that person was talked to 6 months after that other person. That it all should feel like everyone's bouncing off each other, that there's nothing repetitive, is supportive of something that somebody else had said, but nothing that's redundant in the information, because space is also limited and you're trying to jam pack as much as possible into a limited amount of pages. So it is a very difficult puzzle to put together on something like this.
That's interesting. That was one of the questions that I had, was how much of the interviews were done together, because it does read like they're just adding to what each other's saying. So I feel like you did a great job on that, for sure. I've read, so I got a digital for my review, but I did order my own copy of the deluxe. All three of us did, host on the show. We did order a copy for ourselves.
Thank you.
But the book's fabulous. It's amazing. For anyone who hasn't picked it up yet, you should. We'll include some links, point you in the right direction. But it really did impress me with how it is just full of interviews. I was not expecting that from an art book. I was expecting a few images here or there, a little story here, but it's a narrative of the series from the creators, and it's just great.
I know my editor that Patrick would have loved if it was just an art book, because that is a far easier thing, and it would have made a great art work. There's so much great artwork, it would have made a great art book. So that's not even a question. And having this much text and having to juggle all of that, as well as spotlighting the artwork. But my thought going into it, and the way that I approached the Venture Brothers book and this one, was with the idea that I would love for it to be as definitive as possible. Venture Brothers had DVD releases, had audio commentaries, although the commentaries very rarely talked about the actual show itself. It was mainly the two of them doing just banter and having fun. DuckTales has had no home video release that has had bonus features, doesn't have audio commentaries, doesn't have things like that. Occasionally, some of the creators have done interviews. Some of the folks have appeared on your shows. But for the most part, there hasn't been a lot of that behind the scenes information on just story construction, why choices were made, what Easter eggs are there, the art process, what went into development. All of that hasn't been documented. And so this was the way to do that. So for me, I very much wanted it to be a making of book as well. There's been complaint. I've seen some of the reviews and go, not much of an art book. There's a lot of words in it. Sorry. I think the art gets a lot of great play too in it, but this story wouldn't have been told. These creators wouldn't have been celebrated, if that approach hadn't have been taken. And that part was important to me, that happened in this sort of form. And I don't know, did the review version they sent you, the digital, come with the deluxe edition bonus book, or was just the release?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was just the release. So I was waiting on my physical copy to be able to look through the deluxe portion of it. And then mine was one of the ones through Amazon that got held up until like the middle of the month, toward the end of the month. So I was one of the last people to get to read the other book that is included. I'm trying to remember what it's titled now.
The DuckTales guidebook, I believe.
Yeah. DuckTales guidebook. That's right. Yeah. You would know.
I was so impressed when I got the DuckTales guidebook, because it's not just like a supplementary book. It feels like a whole another part 2 of this saga, where it's like over 200 pages. And I think most episodes, or all the episodes, got 4 pages at least, as opposed to the 2 pages that each episode gets in the standard book. And it's so comprehensive. I can't wait. Like you said, it's like a commentary. I can't wait to rewatch the series. Like read the chapter on the episode I'm about to watch, and just dive into the show all over again. I think it's
you can see, when you're reading through the supplemental, you can see where what's in the final version got condensed from. But it is, I think maybe, I'm trying to think of the word count it went down from, because there was a very hard limit on how many words could be in each episode for the regular standard release of the book. And this was all, this was a function of everything that happened with supply chain issues and cost of paper and all that hit. So it is wonderful that Dark Horse and Patrick found a way to make the guidebook happen. Because if it wasn't for that, if you imagine now that you've seen the guidebook, if that didn't exist, if you just had the standard release, how much information, how much additional stuff would have been just gone,
right?
Just not out there.
Right. You would have had it.
Yeah, I would have had it. Oh, and I have more.
Right.
There's more than what's even in the guidebook. So there's a rough stage, then there's a let's get it manageable stage, then there was a let's get it down to the portion that's in the guidebook, and then there was let's get it down to what's in the standard version of the book. So
was the deluxe edition always something that was coming, or was that something that grew out of the amount of information?
The original idea of the deluxe edition was not going to be like, it has a whole separate book with it. That the whole thought and hope was that it would be as big and massive as the Venture Brothers book, which, if you've seen that, is about a 400-page book. It's, it's a big doorstop of a book. And then there was the issue that came up, like I said, with and that original deluxe version would have been like a nice slipcase version. It might have had other pack-ins with it. There was a lot of stuff that was discussed that might have been fun things to put in there. It would have been a classed up version of the book proper, but it probably would not have had substantial information in addition to it. It would have just been fun, beautiful things and items in there. Yeah. But when that whole issue happened with having to trim things down because of the costs, and I really put it on, Patrick for finding a way to make this happen. because when I heard it, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, this is what it's going to have to be now. That's heartbreaking when you know that much information potentially could be gone from it. But it was on, you have to just accept it. I mean, it's just the way things were going at that time, nothing I could do about it. But thankfully a way was found for this to be there. That's why, I very much recommend anyone who can do it that the deluxe edition is the definitive edition of the book.
Yeah, and I don't think people truly can appreciate it and realize it until they have it in their hands and see just how comprehensive the thing is. And I love how you even on page 190 have the DuckTales World Showcase Adventure. At least to have that in there.
Well, let's just say there's a lot of Easter eggs.
Yeah.
In the book for fans to find information, artwork, things that were important to get in there and get out there.
Yeah, I think when I first got the book and I flipped through it, I went to the 87-cent solution to see if there was going to be storyboards from the All I Do Is Win, and of course it was there. No surprise, it's everything you had in there.
I mean, how could you not?
Right. And then
there is additional artwork in the DuckTales guidebook. It's not just a blocks of text. There is additional artwork to be found in there if anyone, thinks it's just a big block of text book. It was a way to sort of shepherd out some additional artwork that couldn't be fit into the book. I mean, I did so many art selects for this book. There are thousands of images that I had done art selects for that just space-wise couldn't make it in. There's so much great artwork. Storyboards. There's some amazing storyboard images that it's a shame people will never see. For every single episode, there's just amazing artwork.
Some of the stories that have come out about what didn't happen with DuckTales since the book has come out, with the Gallery Nucleus panel where they were talking about, and I think it may have been your book was the first place I ever heard that they thought about getting rid of two of the triplets in early drafts of the series. I'd never heard that before. And we've spoken with Frank, and it was one of those things that when I first heard it, I was like, that's diabolical, but that was genius. Like, that was a good way to introduce all the characters. I'm very thankful for the book. I think Duck fans should be thankful for this. Like you said, you compared it to the commentary on a DVD. That's exactly how I looked at it. It's very unlikely that DuckTales gets a home media release in the streaming age. We still hope it happens. We'll definitely be celebrating if it does, but it's unlikely. And as unlikely as that is, it's much more unlikely that we would get a commentary. So having this is the best thing. And honestly, I like commentaries, but commentaries, you got to sit down and watch them. And a book you can pick up and just piece through and spend more time with. I'm actually kind of happy it's a book.
And you're not going to get this many participants in an audio commentary for a home video release.
Yep. Agreed.
So hopefully the and there was a core group, and if I had the time and ability, I would have talked to so many more people. But I'm glad that even if people were not specifically talked to, their presence was felt because the people in the book did talk about those people.
Yeah.
So, a lot of folks get shouted out, mentioned, and acknowledged for their contributions, even if they weren't directly involved through interviews for the book. I mean, I could have been still doing interviews for this. A
lot of people on the show.
There's a lot of people on the show, and they're all worth talking to. Every function on this show, that was what the purpose of trying to get as many folks into the reflections at the end of the book, because that was also once I knew at first that there was only going to be one a cut down version of the book, and knowing how many people I'd spoken to and how many people who wouldn't in a cut down version of the book have their input into episodes, the conversation we had included in the episode sections, because there just wasn't enough space at that point. How many people would have been left out that I talked to that had wonderful insights? Then the notion, I thought, well, what if there was sort of like at the end of a yearbook or something like that, you had everyone's sort of thoughts of working on the show and what it meant to them. And that way, in the standard version, everyone that I talked to could be represented. And then thankfully, the deluxe edition was a reality, and then all of their contributions in the episodes proper could be included. But that was why that reflections thing was important. And even folks that, didn't get additional interviews, I, was able to reach out and hear back from. That was the other big thing, is, sometimes you'd reach out and not hear back from folks. But everyone that I reached out to that got back, they made it into the reflections. So you had people that might not have been available for doing interviews for the show episodes proper itself, but still were important to DuckTales and were able to get into that reflections section. So that section is very important to me, because I think it's a very emotional read.
It is. I was going to say that it is an emotional read for anyone who's followed the series and knows some of the people who worked on the show. Not that you know them, but know who they are and what they worked on. Followed their credits. You read what the show meant to them, and it is a beautiful part of the book. I really enjoyed it. It's like I may tear up a little bit first time reading through it. It's like, this is some good stuff. I was so glad you included it. Speaking of including things, how'd this happen? This dime, where did it come from?
I mean, there was always talk about that being one of when we talked about that early version of the deluxe edition, like what would you have? What would be the fun things to include? And the dime was always part of the conversation. That would be a fun thing to include. There's a lot of other stuff that had been mooted at certain points. But the final realization of it was a nice surprise for me as well, that they found a way to make the dime happen. A lot of people don't know it's hidden in that guidebook based on some of the reviews. I'm sure there were a lot of emails to Amazon. Oh, if you read some of the early Amazon reviews, they're like, mine didn't include the dime, because they just opened, they slid it out of the box and thought there'd be a separate pack in for it, and thought it was missing, but hadn't flipped through the guidebook and realized that it was secreted away in there.
If you're listening to this and you're one of those people that feel like you got shorted a dime, it's in the DuckTales guidebook. Just flip through the bottom corner.
It is a cutout in the guidebook.
It's actually on the Let's Get Dangerous episode of the guidebook page. So you got to at least read from that episode.
Did Frank tell you that it should be there? Was that Frank?
No, that was just the universe acknowledging that Frank is always right.
So one of the things that I learned in the book was that about Bobby Moynihan being considered for Launchpad, and I wanted to know, did you ever get to hear his Launchpad version?
I did not. I did not even ask him to do his Launchpad version. With disrespect to Beck, and also would have annoyed Ben. It was nice to sort of ferret out how everyone was chasing Launchpad.
Yeah,
that was the prime one to get, and to know that Bobby and Beck were on SNL at the time and could have that sort of side conversation about it was also fun. But no, I did not get to hear his Launchpad. But now I'm going to ask him. I'll text him right now and send me a voice memo with your Launchpad. Your Launchpad sounds like Louie. Bobby.
Ken, do you have a favorite character or episode from the series? I know it's like trying to pick your favorite kid, but I have 3 kids and I can easily do that.
Yeah. Oh no. Anyone who says that they can't is a liar. Honestly, it's a toss-up, because I like what they did with Wholesale. Granted, there had been, but they really this show defined that character. what they did introducing a character, and then also what they did with doing their own version of this other character. And it's Della and Webby. I mean, I love Scrooge, and I love what David Tennant brought to it. I'm also was a huge fan of what Alan Young brought to it, and love that version too. And glad there's a whole other version that exists to have fun with, and that character could continue on. And I love the nephews. I love the differentiation of the nephews. I love what everyone did with everyone, but I like that Webby now has a proper character above and beyond what ran into often in the original series of just being a cliche of having a girl character in a show and what that meant at that time. And Webby feeling just well-rounded. Like you could do a Webby spinoff based on this show, and it would work because it's a well-defined character. And again, that's not a knock against what they did in the past, and certainly not a knock against Russi Taylor and her performance, Webby or the nephews, which was fantastic. And I love that version. But I also love what Kate Micucci did with Webby in this, and what they did with the writing and the arc of Webby, and just the Della stuff is incredible. To take that bit of lore and to take that character and hang the emotion of so much of the show in absentia on that character. And after having built that up to such a high expectation, have that pay off when that character arrived, and then not just have it be a one-off, and then you bring that character in to have it redefine your group dynamic and incorporate into your group dynamic that you have existing in the show for the rest of its run. I mean, and then it goes, the episode is whatever happened to Della Duck is just a tour de force, I think, of storytelling. And there was plenty of emotion before that. You know, I think it was the last crash of the Sun Chaser, which had that incredible Scrooge speech and brought that emotion out about the loss and about the truth. But seeing, what Paget did in anchoring, what Paget Brewster did in anchoring Whatever Happened to Della Duck, and allowing the show, an entire episode, to exist without the rest of the cast, and knowing that it could pull that off, and also using the Moon theme. I mean, just for someone who grew up with that, to bring that in and make it an emotional beat and mean something above and beyond just being a wonderful piece of music that originated in a video game. Mm-hmm. That honestly could have been in any of the Capcom games at that time. It just wound up that was what the composer composed for that. It could have been in a Mega Man game. They could have hit upon that to use in a Mega Man game. Who knew? But now it is indelibly attached in multiple medium to DuckTales, and has an emotional attachment to it as well. That's my favorite episode.
So 2 things for that. I believe your book might be the first official like Della Duck merchandise where she's featured anywhere, which is pretty. I mean, I don't know why it took so long, but it's great that her story is recorded somewhere, because if not, some people might miss it if they're not as familiar with the show. And then, do you have the same kind of connections where you can get a DuckTales soundtrack going? Because I feel like that is something that is very missing.
Don't think it hasn't been tried. And Dom Lewis would love if it, having listened to a lot of those tracks, they are incredible. Even if, getting a soundtrack together like that is not an easy thing to do. Also because the audio cues tend to be somewhat short, you would sort of have to adjust that and make sort of like suites of the DuckTales music. Obviously you have the themes and you have the bigger song pieces that he did for the show. I think it's just continual pressure and support from the fans to make it be an issue that doesn't go away. And it doesn't hurt for folks to try and make fan-made stuff of this to prove that there's a market for it and a demand for it. You never know when these things are going to happen. I would say never, but the show now is to a point where it is entirely on the fans to keep it alive.
Mhm.
Because corporate's going to do, because it's a train, it moves, it's going to keep going. There are other projects, there's other focus. DuckTales is not a focus right now. It is not a property that is in production. So now, as a legacy, it's entirely on the fans to keep it alive. And that means if merchandise pops up, if this book pops up, if anything comes out, buy it. If you have the means, buy it up. That's the only metric that they look at now, is if there's a demand for a thing out there. And sometimes it means supporting the things you wouldn't otherwise support. You might think, oh, I don't need another Christmas ornament, or a pin, another pin. But that shows, hey, look, that DuckTales pin, there's demand for these characters. There's demand for this out there. And, it means something to them on a corporate level. And it means something just, I've said it before in as circumspect a way as I can, that the success of something like this book is a thing that has a potential to open the door to other things like it. Because it's unprecedented. Now anyone looking to do anything with a TVA property can point and go, hey, there's that thing that was done. So getting it done, period, now is a thing that has happened.
Right.
What it means for the future, who knows? That's where sort of the success of this now, not just that it's extant, not just that it exists in people's hands, but that people actually, in enough numbers to be significant, will support something like this, is important. Because this was not an inexpensive book to do. It's expensive to do all of the work that goes into the production side of it. When it comes down to, I have to get paid, the designer has to get paid, the editor has to get paid, all of these points along the line have to get paid. You have, and the person who scans the artwork has to get paid. There's a lot of artwork that need to be scanned for this. A lot of stuff, a lot of design work had to go into this. That's before you even get to the production costs or the licensing fees. To do a book that is this high a quality, that's a museum quality on high grade paper, that looks as beautiful, that feels as beautiful, that will stand the test of time, that isn't just on newsprint, all cost money. So there's a lot of that budgeting that goes into the idea of, should we do something like this again? So it being a success, and being a success demonstrably as quickly as possible, is important. So if people have the means to do so, get it now, pick it up now, when those numbers are being monitored more acutely than they might be if it trickles down the road. And stuff like, if people want the deluxe edition, which is the definitive edition, who knows? I don't know what the production numbers on that are. I don't know. It's not, again, inexpensive to do. You have that pack in dime. You have a beautiful slipcase. You have the gold foil pages. I don't know what the trigger mechanism is for when they go, well, the sales don't merit doing another print run on this, because that's an economic reality they're going to address at some point, and it's just going to quietly go out of print, and it just won't be available at that point. So I certainly think the standard edition will be available longer, but you never know. You never know how licenses work either. It could be something where suddenly the Disney license is gone at Dark Horse, and it's like, well, we got our stock that exists, but we can't make more.
Right.
So if you have the means to do so, And I guess what the digital editions, you can't get the definitive. I can't keep calling it definitive, but you know why. You can't get the deluxe as like a Kindle version or anything like that. Like the only way to get that DuckTales guidebook seems to be just in the deluxe edition.
Yeah. And it's more than worth the difference. If you have the means, it's more than worth the difference.
I mean, it is a second book. I mean, it is page count wise the same page count as the standard edition of the book.
Yeah, I think people should buy the digital and the deluxe so they get get the best of both worlds there.
It's a lighter to read it digitally.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot easier to read on the train or, at work.
But you can't get your Kindle signed. I mean, it makes reading other things a little awkward.
Yes. And that's why when we, like I said, I got a digital for the review, but I was like, I got to own this. Before I even saw the digital, I knew I had to own it. I'm not the type that I have to have everything, but I like to support the show and buy things. Like I do have a lunchbox ornament on my tree. We supported the show every way that we could. And this was one thing that I was like, I've got to have that. That's one thing that as a fan, I need to have that in my collection of things.
I mean, the show didn't get a ton of merchandise.
Mm-hmm.
It got one wave of the action figures. It got PVCs to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you got t-shirts and some oddball things here and there, like that weird duck ping pong game, shake a tail feather thing.
Yeah. And a lunchbox.
Where it's just like, it's basically, here's a game, we're going to throw the DuckTales logo on it. And then you got some ornaments, and it's shown up as pins in the Disney parks.
Yep.
And some ornaments in the parks. And you said the Hallmark ornament. We got the lunchbox and thermos that came out. But there's not a lot of deep merchandise. And it is, you might see something every 6 months now. Like if you were to do a definitive, I'm going to try and get all the stuff released for the DuckTales 2017 show, you could do it.
Yeah.
You could do it without too much of an issue. Because it's just, like you said, there's no Della stuff out there. I mean, because Della didn't exist in the promotional images that were the standard promotional images for the show.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, stuff like the action figure line and a lot of those licenses were gone by the time that Della was fully incorporated into the show.
Yeah. So,
there certainly are other venues that Della stuff exists, but it's not sanctioned to get Della merchandise. And it's, I have my issues and questions of stuff like, well, if you're going to have on-demand merchandise in the parks, why isn't there more selections? Like, why can't you go to their print a t-shirt on-demand kiosk in the parks and all this stuff gets refreshed and is made available? There are people out there to sell to them. So,
if that were announced, I know a number of people who would be there as soon as they could in order to get something with Della on it.
Throw her on a tumbler, throw her on a mug.
Yeah.
All these things, if you have print on demand and it's just adding an image to the database, it makes no sense. I mean, we don't know. Here's hoping we see some stuff for the Epcot adventure.
Yeah.
They didn't do a lot of that stuff with the previous ones. Like, you didn't see a ton of Kim Possible merchandise suddenly get released specifically for that, or a ton of Phineas and Ferb stuff that was exclusive to that.
Yeah.
But here's hoping for something different. At least something out of it would be nice.
There's a chance.
There's always a chance.
Yeah, I'm hoping for like a new Magic Band plus the new version of the Magic Band have a DuckTales version of that, or the poster that you have in the book is just great artwork. I would love to see them make some kind of deluxe print of that. I think that would be cool. We totally got robbed on that Fat Mojo Wave 2. Have you seen like the pictures of what should have been released? I know Frank has a whole bunch of them on his desk.
He does.
Protos.
He does. He doesn't have the Gizmo Duck though.
Yeah.
No
We
one
tried.
has Gizmo Duck.
We tried.
We've
I
tried
promise.
really hard.
We
Everybody tried, but
Yep.
I don't think those exist anymore for tax
Yeah.
purposes.
Yep. Somebody got rid of those.
I was happy that the Fentons kind of
The Fenton's trickling out has been weird. Considering that they continue to trickle out has been interesting.
Yeah, I keep messaging the guy, and I'm like, "Can you find me Adela? What's going on?"
I mean, and they're not great Fentons.
No, they're tiny.
And he's massively underscaled. That's not terribly on model to Fenton. But it's good that it exists and that people can get it. I mean, the fact that anyone can go on eBay right now and it's not expensive. It's another one of those things that if you have an inkling to do it, get it while you can, because that's going to dry up eventually too.
Yeah. That was one of those. I got to have that. That's one thing I've got to have. That was one of those as well. I did want to ask you one more thing about the book. And we're not going to spoil the story because the story's fabulous and everybody needs to get the book and read the story. But I had never, and as much as we follow DuckTales, I had never heard of the manila envelope until your book. And at that point, I think you also did a promo for the book where you did a video on YouTube with it.
I did a whole JFK breakdown.
Yeah. So how did you find that? Like, was that something that you saw and you wanted to chase down, or did somebody bring it up?
It was brought up in the conversations, and it would have been, trying to remember if it was Bobby or Ben that brought it up first. I want to say it was Bobby. I think it was Bobby, because then I think back to Bobby for additional commentary on it. But once I knew about it, then I could ask the others, and specifically knowing about it before I talked to David Tennant and getting his perspective on it was the important linchpin, because you couldn't just get Bobby and Ben's perspective on it.
Right.
You had to get David's for it to be a proper story. And once I had that, then I knew that was a narrative, and I knew what the conversation was and what I'd have to ask David to be able to weave it the way it's presented. That was one of the last things that I edited for the book and put together. And I had the most fun weaving that manila envelope story together and seeing how it all played to build that narrative, and knowing that it actually has a joke structure throughout and builds to a punchline was that's the fun moments on things like this, is when you can see the pieces fall into place. And this happens in anything, when talking about an episode, when you see that a narrative is supported by everyone's comments and you can build that throughout, is a joy for me. And that's why I like doing, because my strength isn't interviewing people, isn't talking to people, and to be able to do that. And then I feel, again, for the reader, and you can tell me if this is successful or not, that it feels like you're hearing from them. Like I want you to feel as you're reading it that I'm invisible in the process, that you're just sitting at a panel and listening to them talk about all of the things that are going on. You're not hearing my questions prompting them or asking for a corroboration on things or asking for additional info. All you're hearing is them talking to you about the making of the show or these elements of the show. That you just sat down for 100-hour audio commentary and they're telling you about everything.
Yeah, you did it.
You're not having to ask questions. You're just hearing all this regurgitation of every aspect you could hopefully, possibly want out of it in the course of the book and the bonus book.
And the bonus. You were successful, because I would say that it feels like you're sitting down and watching the episodes with them and they're going, oh yeah, there was that. And they're bringing stuff up. It feels like that when reading the book. And I
then if-
wondered, I was like, where's Ken? Ken's not in his book. But I mean, I love that you did it that way. Your passion for the series and for the medium, putting the book together, is apparent. I cannot stress enough. We've said it on here. I cannot stress enough. If you have the means, buy the book. Get the deluxe while it's available. It's worth it. It's a great addition to your collection. There's so much heart put into this. It's apparent, and I love it. And so thank you. And Patrick, you brought up Patrick several times. Thank you to Patrick for your work and dedication on it, and for everyone who interviewed. I don't know if any of you still listen to us, but thank you. And Ken, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for this book, though. It means a
thank you
lot
for
to
having
us
me.
as fans.
Ultimately, it's as much for you as it is for the people who made the show. So it's important that you all enjoy it, and it's important that those artists are celebrated within it. So thank you for having me on.
All right. Well, with that, I guess we'll end this one by saying until next time.
Stay glom golden. And stay dangerous. Is that my line? I forgot. It's been a while.
Stay tuned for what that line may be.